United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could please ask everyone for a brief moment of silence in recognition of those and veterans who have passed. In particular, I'd like to have a special moment of silence to the family of Edmund J. Warrenix, Jr. upon his passing on 16 April 2017. Mr. Warrenix served as a combat infantry in C Company, the 343rd Infantry Regiment, 86th Infantry Division in the Army Corps, 12th Army Group, the European Theater of Operations, in combat operations during World War II. He and his wife, Rose, were in business in Bridgewater for over 50 years. He was the owner of Western Auto Store on Central Square. The store was a popular gathering spot for residents. It was often said that if you wanted something brought to the attention of the town, you had to go to Western Auto and gather support. He was an avid supporter of local youth athletic programs and sponsored many teams. Thank you. Okay, we have a fairly brief agenda tonight. April 24th. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our meeting on April 4th.
So moved.
Second. There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, the minutes have been passed. Announcements from the president. I have two announcements tonight. One of them, if you just bear with me, it's from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. It's a notice of amendments to the 333 CMR 13.02 requests for exclusion from wide area pesticide applications. As of January 13th, 2017, the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources has implemented changes to the regulation promulgated at 333 CMR 13.00, specifically 13.03 regulation. The regulation establishes a procedure for private property owners to exclude their property from wide area pesticide applications. The following changes have been made to the process by which requests for exclusions must be made. Exclusions requests may no longer be made to a city or town clerk and must be made to the department, and that's the Department of Massachusetts Agricultural Resources. There is no longer a deadline by which exclusion requests can be made. They can be made at any point in time during the year. Exclusion requests shall become effective 14 days from the receipt of the request. All exclusion requests, regardless of the date made, will expire on December 31st of the year in which the request was made. Requests may be made electronically or via hard copy. All information related to exclusion requests and the regulation can be found on the department's website at www.mass.gov/EEA/agencies/AGR pesticides/mosquito/pesticide application exclusions.html. So you'll have to rewind your video player to get that again.
Mr. President, I'd suggest you ask the town manager to put that website up on the town website.
If you receive an exclusion request, please forward the request or direct the request to the following, and that's the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, 251 Causeway Street, Suite 500, Boston, Mass. 02114, to the attention of Juan Carlos Gutierrez. So that is an announcement for everybody that's concerned about that. The second announcement I have this evening is to just announce on June 1st, 2017 at 6:30 p.m., there will be a Housing Production Plan 2017 update. It'll be a community meeting, again, June 1st, 2017 at 6:30 p.m., right here in the council chambers, Academy Building, 66 Central Square. Okay, moving on. We don't have any proclamations tonight. The time being 7:35, I'll go to the public hearing, then do the
I'll make a motion to take item F out of order.
out of order. Well, it's not out of order, it's time for the hearing.
Second.
It's 7:36. Okay, so,
President, by rule, though, we do have to stay in order. Even though 7:36 is the time of the hearing, it can be later than 7:36, not exactly at 7:35 or whatever. We can still entertain business open forum before the hearing.
okay, but there's a motion, there's a second to take item F out of order. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? All those in
I'm figuring it's going to be pretty quick.
Okay, all those in favor, taking item F out of order? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so I'm going to open public hearing, order 0-2017009. It's a transfer of order, capital transfer for water retained earnings. At their meeting held on 3/7/17, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 2-0 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee voted 7-0 to approve this item at their meeting held on 3/27/17. This measure has been duly advertised in the Enterprise and on the town's website for a public hearing. The measure may be finally considered for a final vote this evening. So I'll declare the hearing open. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak in favor of this order? Does anybody wish to speak in favor of this order? I'll refer to the town manager for a brief explanation.
Mr. President, I'll actually read a very good explanation of this, just so I think the councilors know, but so people watching will know exactly what this is, because it will reappear at your next regular meeting, or the second step will appear at your next regular meeting. The Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners is seeking to improve the quality of water drawn from 4 existing wells at the High Street location by removing iron and manganese. The 4 wells include wells 3, 6, 8, and 9. Treatment of these water supplies is needed to allow pumping of the wells without introducing elevated levels of iron and manganese into the water distribution system. As the council is well aware, recent complaints have been received, or more multiple year, we've received complaints at the water department regarding the water quality in the areas served by these wells. The High Street wells provide approximately 41% of the water in Bridgewater and have had a history of producing water at elevated concentrations of these 2 minerals. These elevated levels of iron and manganese can cause biofilm buildup in the pipelines, stained plumbing fixtures in homes and businesses, and can cause a noticeably bitter metallic taste to food and beverages. It's anticipated that the proposed treatment facility will be constructed on town property that is located on the north side of High Street, with access to 3-phase power, telephone, natural gas, and 2 existing water mains, one 10-inch and one 12-inch water main. The facility will be designed for a flow rate of 1.62 million gallons per day, and that's what's anticipated to be necessary to treat the water coming from those 4 High Street wells. The project has been selected by the Department of Environmental Protection for state revolving fund funding, and that's a $6.25 million commitment at a 2% interest, and principal loan forgiveness for some of it is determined by Mass DEP after final applications are submitted and the projects are reviewed. So we have achieved and gotten commitment from Mass DEP as part of the revolving loan, and we are not yet sure how much of that will be forgiven, but we at least do qualify for that loan. So this tonight is $504,000, a little more than $504,000 to complete the engineering on the project. That is not eligible for SRF funding, and that is the reason that we are looking to retained earnings to be able to complete the engineering. Once the engineering is completed, we will be looking to go out in mid-October to submit all the design documents and supporting financial information, and then get started on the project soon after that. So you will see this week the design money, and then next week, or next regular meeting, you'll see the actual loan order will come to you and obviously go through the normal process after that. So this is just the design portion of that overall project.
Okay. Is there anyone else here from the public that wishes to speak in favor of this order? Is anybody here that wishes to speak in favor of this order? Is there anybody in the public that wishes to speak in opposition of this order? Is there anybody in the public that wishes to speak in opposition to this order? Seeing none, I'll refer to my colleagues. Do my colleagues have any questions or concerns about this order? Mr. Wood?
I don't have any issues with the dollars. I think it's good for the community. I hear, this water source affects a lot of my constituents, and I hear from many people about the dirty water and the taste in the water, that sort of thing. So I think this goes a long way to cleaning up the apparent, issues with the water.
Sure. Mr. Columbotus?
I guess I'm just wondering, we really don't have any alternative, is that right? Mr. Dutton, we don't really have, we could let the water remain as it is, but this is the only way we can remediate. the
Correct.
situation.
It's the only way to actually remove the discoloration and the taste from the water. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The public hearing is now closed. I'll entertain a motion to act on the order.
So I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second, this does require a roll call vote. Getting the hang of this now. Go right ahead.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch. Yes. Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Dr. Perry.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
So the order passes. The next order is I'll open the continued public hearing on Order 2017-008, laying out and accepting a private way. I also want to bring to the attention of my colleagues that information I was given prior to the meeting is that it's the request to continue this again for 2 weeks, not next week if we have a meeting next week, but for our May 9th meeting. So I'll entertain a motion that we continue this public hearing on Order 2017-008 to May 9th.
I'll make that motion,
I'll second.
and
Is there any discussion, Tim?
yes,
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
because at that next meeting, the counselor who introduced this won't be here. I'd be willing to take up the sponsorship so people can have a discussion about it. So I'd make that to the council clerk.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of continuing the hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So now we'll move on to item D, Citizens Open Forum. Are there any citizens here this evening that wish to speak in the open forum portion of our meeting? Any citizens at all? Just ask you to come to the podium and identify yourself for the record.
Thank you. My name is Pat Neary, 225 Lakeside Drive, and I've come here because it's Earth Month, and I wanted to talk with you about a couple of things. And I also know that you will be discussing the litter, illegal dumping and litter ordinance this evening. I wanted to mention a couple of things that I noticed. I don't know how you plan to enforce this ordinance if you do pass it. I know that you talk about identifying the properties that have the problem, and I know you're also mainly addressing large items, but it also addresses litter. And I know, it's a terrible situation in our country, but here in our town. We can't do much about the rest of the country, but we can try to address it here in our town. And if you pass the ordinance, there has to be enforcement. I know that, for example, a lot of drivers that don't have maybe the proper tag on their construction truck or or they have some issue with their vehicle, will not drive through West Bridgewater. I think you all know that, because they enforce those regulations. And if we get to the point that we can do that here in our town, as far as litter goes, people won't do it anymore. It's really embarrassing, and now that the snow is gone, I think you've all seen what a mess it is in town. So hopefully you can come up with some way to enforce that. I don't know who's going to look up the property owner's address, who's going to send the certified letter for all those departments that can issue a violation. Who's going to do all of that? Maybe the clerk? I just don't know how that works, but if we pass an ordinance, we have to have follow-through. I mean, I don't think we're really following through on the plastic bag ordinance, but people are trying to at least follow through on bringing their own bag. And I wanted to mention that we have to try to change people's behavior. I don't know how we're going to do that other than in the school system when they're younger. Remember, we used to have "Don't be a litter bug." We don't have that anymore. There used to be a big billboards here and there, and I'm sure it was a federal program at the time, but maybe we can find some way to do it in our town. I know you all know that there's a litter issue, and we have to do something to stop it. There are some towns that have impact fees on businesses that create these problems, that actually create expense for the towns. It's kind of late for us to do that for new establishments, and we don't want to discourage any business, I know that. But think about if we could assess an impact fee on a McDonald's, a Burger King, the worst offenders, Dunkin' Donuts. When we do cleanups, it's usually 75% Dunkin' Donuts. And they can afford it. And then we can hire, with the impact fee, we can hire someone to clean up. We'll have a little more money for maybe a guy at the highway department, or a person, or even people on that SAVE program, just so we can get our town cleaned up. And I know that we're having a cleanup here next month, but it's really a shame that the volunteers have to clean up. I know I'm having one at the boat landing next Sunday. If you'd like to come, Mr. Souza, it's at 10 o'clock. It's in your precinct. And I just...
I'd invite Mr. Haley, too. He used to live down there.
Oh, yeah, you can come, too. It could be some of the litter from way back when you were a kid. But we do have to try to change the behavior. And if you think it's mostly the college kids, let's do something with them. Let's try to have a joint effort that they can stop this behavior, or they can help pay to clean it up. And I thank you for listening to me again.
Thank you.
What time on Sunday?
10 o'clock. I'll have the bags, and there are 2 containers there, so just bring gloves.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak tonight? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Guillaume Dugados. I live at 1375 South Street. Been in Bridgewater for about 6 years now. I come from the Chicago area. There's 2 things I really that kind of shocked me when I moved in Massachusetts. One was that it was really green, lots of trees, and I like that. And the other, that it was really dirty. And so I completely agree with what Pat just said. The litter on the streets, not only Bridgewater, but for that matter, Bridgewater, is incredible. In February, it was nice, about 70 degrees, if you remember, almost spring. I went outside, I picked up about 60 gallons of trash. Alcohol bottles, you name it, small ones, big ones. So I did my part, but that was really annoying, really shocking. To illustrate also what Pat said, I'll tell a little story. So I used to live in that Chicago suburb, and my neighbor put some branches on my side of the property. I didn't touch them because he did it. 2 weeks later, I got a notice from the town, remove it or ticket. And I think this is something that's lacking here. There's a guy on South Street that has a TV outside, like this big, in front of his house. It's been there for a month. I'm not saying he should get a $25 fine, but at least somebody give him a warning. Hey, remove it, please, or you get a ticket. That kind of thing we should really enforce, because that, it degrades the entire community. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak in the citizens' open forum portion?
Good evening, Jim Candido, 37 Stetson Street here in Bridgewater. This is just a follow-up from 2 months ago when I presented 4 issues to the council at the mini-town meeting that you had. To date, we have had no action, completion of work or issues, or even any acknowledgement from the council. I'm here again tonight asking for a written response for when each will be completed as requested. I just want to touch on the 4 bullets again. On the repaving issue, you may want to put a hold on School Street, if it's not too late, or Pine Street from being repaved, and take a look at Stetson Street. The condition is worse than both of them. I'm also sure that neither street has the traffic load as Stetson carries. The noise factor is also increasing due to different layers of pavement. When repaving Stetson Street, it may prove beneficial to add a speed table, such as other towns have. Put it at the apex on the street. This will keep people from speeding up and down. Beacon Hill just approved Bill 2783 for local roads and bridges improvements of the infrastructure. This approved amount is for $400 million, which is $200 million more than they requested. It's my understanding that $200 million will be released this year and $200 million will be released next year. I guess my question is, where is Bridgewater's share being used this year? Second bullet is no parking signs during the day on Stetson Street as posted on other streets around the Common and the business district. Number 3, elimination of truck traffic, especially trailer trucks, and those over 3 to 4 yard dump limits. This has been mentioned before, and there used to be signs at Pearl Street and on Stetson Street stating no trailer trucks or big trucks, except if they had to go down to Fairview or Spartacus area. Number 4, elimination of residential dumpsters. This creates an unsightly appearance to the public traveling on Stetson Street and many other locations throughout Bridgewater. This is really an eyesore for the whole town, So, that's it for tonight. I look forward to repeating this in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Is there anybody else here that wishes to speak in the citizens' open forum portion of the meeting? Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to appointments. We have none tonight. We'll move on to licensed transactions. We have none. Presentations, we have none. We'll go right to the town manager's report.
All right, Mr. President, I've got a few items tonight. The first one, I think as council knows, the Mass DOT and the MBTA held a public meeting in Dartmouth, I believe it was last week. I'm happy to report that Bridgewater was well represented. The discussion involved the MBTA's Phase 1 proposal, which is a change, a recent change in their approach to South Coast Rail. But it involved Phase 1, which would provide service from New Bedford, Fall River, Taunton, up to Boston by building what they refer to as a southern triangle amongst those 3 South Coast towns cities, and then using the Middleborough secondary line, and then on up to the Middleborough-Lakeville commuter rail line as their Phase 1. The Phase 2, which is more expensive and more complicated to construct, would then, what they're proposing is they would continue to advance the full Stoughton electric alternative design, and unfortunately, I think there's widespread opinion that if the Middleborough secondary line and the Middleborough-Lakeville commuter line are used, then the Phase 2 will never come to pass. And in any case, folks can get more information on that. I think we posted that information on the website if they want to take a look. MassDOT and MBTA have asked for written comments to be submitted. They've extended the deadline to be submitted early next month. Honestly, at this point, from my perspective, I don't think we have nearly enough information upon which to comment. So to the extent that I issue any written comment, it would be that you know, nothing should happen until the MBTA comes to present, obviously, those three cities: Middleborough, Lakeville, Bridgewater, and on up. So that, if any, obviously, if any of the counselors want more info or want to reach out or have opinions that we should include, or I should include in any kind of correspondence to MBTA, so please reach out and we'll go from there. Good news is Comcast has been installing all of the fiber and the critical infrastructure that we need to do a number of things. One, broadcast live. Two, dramatically improve the picture and voice quality of council meetings and get us to where we should be in short order. So I don't have a go live date yet, but they are working. We were quite pleased to see the lines go up and the work going on down at BTV to arrange for the fiber broadcast picture and voice. I think I mentioned this last meeting, but we have completed negotiations with the DEP, State DEP, and the Environmental Protection Agency on our wastewater discharge permit, and we have agreed to a 10-year period to satisfy the permit demands, which is what our appeal had requested. So that's the good news. In our negotiations, we argued that there was an affordability issue and that the ratepayers in the Seward areas could not afford what we projected to be a dramatic increase in sewer rates in order to get it done in the 5-year period. And affordability is one of the few factors that the EPA and the towns can use to actually negotiate a longer timeline for implementation of the permit. And to that end, we have agreed to an administrative consent order, but it does have very clear language in it that allows us to revisit and possibly extend the timeline even further if our own affordability analysis ends up showing that the burden on the Seward areas, on the folks living in the Seward areas, is as substantial as we think. So that's overall good news. We got the extension that we were looking for, and we got the language in the ACO that allows us to go back and have a discussion with EPA if there's a true affordability issue there. The Duxboro 40B development, I think everybody knows what that is, off of Curve Street. That 40B ZBA hearing resumes on Wednesday, May 24th, right here in the council chambers. So that's May 24th, 7:30, right here in the council chambers. The council had asked me to solicit interest on a marijuana advisory committee, and I'm happy to report that we've had great response to that. And I won't make any
420
cracks.
people?
No, not 420 people. Now I'm going to have 20 phone calls tomorrow asking what 400 and what the relevance is, but that's okay. We have had great response. The council said up to 10 members, and I think we are going to have just about 10 members, so that's a good thing. I've talked to most of them so far, and I'm happy to report that they really do represent a great cross-section of Bridgewater. They're very interested in the issue. Some of them have, I think, strong opinions, and I told them that's fine. This is one of those committees where your strong opinion is of some assistance to the committee overall. So I will come to you on May 9th to ratify those appointees if all goes well, and we'll be off and running. We had a health and wellness fair. The first one, we do this every year, and the first one in this building was last week, and our thanks go out to those businesses in Bridgewater that underwrote the whole day, and those businesses were Bridgewater Savings, Rite Aid, Maha Yoga Center, the YMCA, Great Horizon Healthcare, Physical Therapy U, A to Zen Wellness, our very own Dr. Kevin Perry as well, and overall we had about 25 other sponsors who provided some help and assistance in teaching our employees and retirees how to more properly care for themselves, and all worked out very well there. I know the council is anxious to hear any progress on Skip's Liquors. Unfortunately, I don't have anything new to report. We do know that the owner is continuing to try to find a contractor to pick up where his previous contractor, didn't even leave off, but pick up the project from the previous contractor. I don't know if I mentioned in detail, but the footings that were poured there were footings poured in that for that project, and the footings were never issued a permit, and they were never poured properly with the required rebar that was called for on the architectural plan. So our previous interim building inspector obviously denied the permit, and we required that those footings be ripped out. So that was the beginning of that issue, and the owner of the property evidently terminated his relationship with his contractor, so he is looking for somebody to pick that up and carry it forward. There is a lot of activity going on with community and economic development, and I've asked Andrew to attend a meeting in late May or early June, depending on your schedule and how that fleshes out, to give you a little bit more comprehensive update. But in the meantime, a reminder to viewers and counselors of a public meeting tomorrow, which is Wednesday, the 26th, at 6:30 right here in this room on the downtown pedestrian safety pedestrian safety initiative. And basically the town's looking for input from residents, visitors, students, anybody that uses the downtown area and is concerned about pedestrian and bicycle safety in particular. And we want to know what works, what more likely what doesn't work in the downtown area. And we expect pretty good feedback from people. There's no presentation as such, but we just want to hear what does work and what doesn't work. And with that information, our consultants can then go and complete their development of a complete streets prioritization plan, which is really just sort of a fancy way of saying we're looking for a list of projects that are in order of importance for us. And then once we have that list, we can look to the Complete Streets program to fund a certain number of those pieces of construction, actual construction. And they may be as simple as making sure that the sidewalks work properly, that we've got appropriate handicapped accessibility, and so forth. And they may be much more complex as changing some of the locations of crosswalks to make it more pedestrian friendly, doing bump outs in appropriate places where those crosswalks are in order to provide a little barrier for pedestrians. So those are the types of things that they're looking for. Anyway, again, that meeting is tomorrow, Wednesday, April 26th at 6:30 p.m. right here in the council chambers. I want to let the council know that the Brian McSheffrey Corner dedication is this Sunday, April 30th at 1 p.m. Obviously, it's at the intersection of High and Broad Street. We will obviously have very tight parking constraints, so anybody that wants to walk or anybody that wants to park off-site and walk, obviously that would be great, or carpool for that matter. The police department will be there to try to direct people where to park, but essentially northbound on Broad Street and westbound on High Street are the best locations for folks that want to come to park. So again, that's Sunday, April 30th at 1 p.m., and knock on wood, I think the weather will be pretty good. Just a quick rundown of some of the boards and committees, aside from telling you all of them, but a quick rundown of boards and committee openings that we certainly could use some help on. The Cable Advisory Committee, the Community Preservation Committee, Conservation Commission, Disability Commission, Energy Committee, Finance Committee, Housing Partnership, the Master Plan Committee, the Open Space Committee, the Planning Board, Water and Sewer Board, and Zoning Board of Appeals. So we have openings on all those boards. That's all on the website under volunteer opportunities. If anybody is interested, anybody watching this is interested in volunteering for any of those boards, some of them require a little more knowledge and expertise than others, but some of them are certainly open to people that just have an interest. And feel free to reach out to me. Nobody's volunteerism will get short shrift, and I talk to anybody and everybody that's interested in volunteering. Last piece of news, I think everybody by now knows that our town attorney will probably not be with us much longer. If all goes well for him, he will be a judge in Superior Court, and so congratulations go to Mr. Gilday, and I know the community sends its congratulations as well. And that is it. I do know I owe the council and the community a broader update on what's going on around town, and we've been busy the last couple of weeks, so I will hopefully get something out this week, and everybody will be so up to date, it'll be incredible.
Questions for the
what I have.
town manager, Mr. Wood?
Thank you. Out of the citizens' comments, Mr. Candido, I think one thing I can firmly get behind out of all the things, he had valuable stuff. Speed tables on Stetson Street make complete sense to me. Because we already agreed to make it 20 miles an hour. We all know it's a cut-through. We all know that there's a lot of traffic there. Speed tables are at my workplace. Speed tables are down at the college. Speed tables are used elsewhere very effectively. As long as the plow drivers know where they are, they're not going to get damaged. And they really do a very an excellent job at slowing down traffic that normally wouldn't slow down. Especially if we pave the street, it's going to be like 80 miles an hour if that gets paved. The second thing is, I think you missed also the parking committee that we voted to form, which I think has one member. He's sitting in the audience. He volunteered for me, right? No, he's shaking his head no. And cable committee, I think we had, have one member there also. So there's a lot of opportunities there. But here's a question for you. In the month of March, or February, which was fairly nice, how many arrests were on a typical weekend?
Off the top of my head, I'm not quite sure.
Okay, so you didn't mention Springfest. And
not.
according to the news, there were 23 arrests. And I suspect that many of them came from my district, Ted's neighborhood, Peter's neighborhood, right across the street. I think, 23 is down significantly from last year, but it's way too many. And there were, comments on Facebook and elsewhere that the road was, hazardous with all the kids running around. What I'd like to suggest is, and in a friendly way, is that we invite, the leaders of BSU that handle student affairs and and outreach and that sort of thing, and to discuss what we can do next year to kind of, soften that again, so that, it doesn't get out of control. Maybe there's more activities on the campus for students to partake in. One of the issues, I think, was raised by someone else. It's a dry campus, so everybody leaves the campus to have these parties, which have now become tradition. And I remember when I was in school down there, they'd open up the baseball field, sell $5, you went in and had a couple beers and then left. And there was a cop standing right there, so no one got out of control. I'm not suggesting that's an alternative, but I'm saying that back then there weren't 21 arrests on the weekend. And so we need to find a way to get this pattern to stop. I think that'd help the neighborhood, among other things. Yeah, skips, it's a hole in the ground. I think with the rain, it's probably going to erode more. And I hope we can find a solution for that. And that's it for me tonight.
Anyone else with questions for the town manager tonight? I just have just one thing we could touch base on. You mentioned the Street Smart plan. Does that have to do with, I know on the town website, there was posted a priority list of streets in town that are on a list to be either repaved or grooved or whatever. Is that being revised, and will there be a new one? Because, I agree, and I know Stetson Street has been before us several times, but it is an eyesore. It does need to be repaved before the speed bumps or whatever you call it go in there.
Tables.
But tables. And I know there are other streets in the town that are probably just as bad or worse, but is there any way over the next year or so, a revised priority list of what will be paved or grinded or grooved or whatever done?
Short answer is yes. I think we can now put up the work plan for the balance of this season. You were talking about complete streets, and I just want to make it clear that the complete streets is a completely separate thing.
Okay.
But certainly, I think if it's not there, then the updated pavement management plan should be on the website. I'll make sure it is. I think it's there. But that's a plan, and that's just sort of it's a guide that we use to determine which streets we're gonna do.
Prioritize, right.
Yeah, but I'll get the next setup online.
Okay. Anything else? Moving on to discussion items A. Addition of a special town council meeting Tuesday, May 2nd. I brought this forward, and I'll refer to the town manager in a second, is that due to some timing issues and timelines of having a special election to address the feasibility study, I believe, for the plans that may go forward for the elementary school, we need to call for a special election in June to do this. So I'll refer to the town meeting as to why we can't do it tonight, why we should do it May 2nd, and why May 9th doesn't work. So go ahead.
All right, let me just get my my calendar up here for you, and I will explain it. Essentially, what there is a required 35 days between when you approve, 35 days or more between when you approve a ballot question and the date of the actual election. Looks good so far. There you have it. All right, while it's warming up, let me run through the dates that we've worked with bond counsel, our own town attorney, and the schools on this. And I think it works out quite well, but essentially the reason that if we're shooting for a June 10th ballot date, then we want to wrap that up by at least Tuesday a week from now, so that there's plenty of time for that work to take place and the clerk can do what she needs to do. So April 25th, you're going to see first reading on the special election date, which we're setting at June 10th, as well as the ballot question. Wednesday, tomorrow, the district is voting, and presumably, they haven't voted yet, but presumably voting to authorize an $800,000 bond for the feasibility work, subject to a debt exclusion vote, which is the June 10th vote. And then they refer that authorization to the town for acceptance. Then the Tuesday, so if we choose to have a special meeting on Tuesday, May 2nd, that will be obviously limited to a second reading and vote to call the election on June 10th, and the ballot question, which is the debt exclusion. You will also have a first reading of the acceptance of the $800,000 bond authorization to fund the feasibility phase, subject to the debt exclusion vote. And then you would refer that to Finance Committee and Budget and Finance. On Monday, May 8th, if all goes well, this date is somewhat flexible, but on Monday, May 8th, the joint Finance Committee and Budget and Finance Committee will meet to recommend acceptance of the $800,000 bond authorization subject to the debt exclusion vote. Then at your next regular meeting on Tuesday, May 9th, you'll have the second reading of the acceptance of the $800,000 bond authorization subject to the debt exclusion vote. And then you will authorize the council clerk to advertise that for hearing. That advertisement will appear on Wednesday, May 17th, and that will be advertising for the acceptance of the $800,000 bond authorization subject to the debt exclusion vote. So at your Friday, May 26th, at your Tuesday, June 6th meeting, you will be able to hold the hearing on the acceptance of the $800,000 and then vote to accept that. And then Saturday, June 10th, would be the debt exclusion vote. And I don't know why.
This will all be up on the website since it wasn't up on the screens tonight, right?
Yes. Yes, if we've held off putting this schedule on the website until the council actually has the first reading of the election date and then moves forward. So once that happens, we'll put it right up on the website.
Is there anybody here that cannot come next Tuesday? Everybody's available? There's only 5 people.
I'll make a motion to add a special town council meeting for Tuesday, May 2, 2017.
Is there a second?
Second.
In discussion?
Yes.
Confirm.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, can you confirm the time?
7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Perfect.
So it will be a half hour earlier than our normal meeting, 7 p.m. Is that a problem with anybody, 7? Okay, and we will reorganize a week from tonight as well. And we will swear in the new council member and swear in the re-elected councilors. And we will have the reorganization and the new council member will be sworn in that night and take up this issue only. A week from tonight, yes.
I'd just like to continue the discussion on the issue. after,
Okay.
When you have a second.
That's it,
All
I'm
right,
done.
Okay. No, I mean, it's a compressed time frame, and we're trying to accommodate the regional school district, and we're trying to accommodate getting things moving, which haven't been moving for a while, but they couldn't get moving till we got actually accepted into the SBA program, which we did finally last February, and we went through an eligibility phase, and now we're going through another phase with the SBA. $800,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But we need to know what's going on with the schools. And you know, we need to look at it from both angles. We need to look at it from what's best from the town of Bridgewater's perspective for these buildings, and what's best from the school district's perspective for these buildings, and decide, does it make sense to go it alone without SBA funding, or to go with the SBA and get SBA funding? And that's probably going to come down to dollars and cents, because if I can get $25 million, if I can get $50 million of work for $25 million, I'm getting that. Yeah. If I can only get $25 million of work for $25 million, I'll take the 50 for 25 every day of the week. So we need to put this on the ballot. We need to get it in front of people to vote on, to say, yes, we're moving forward. We're not going to cut off any of our options. And that's all we're really trying to do right now, I think, as a community and as a school district, is to say, we got accepted to the SBA program. We just got to move the ball down the down the field a little bit more, and get this feasibility vote. Whether or not we go with the SBA, we still need to know what's going on with our schools, and how we can best create a school building environment that's conducive to learning for all the kids from pre-K all the way up through 12th grade. So, you know, unfortunately, the timing is we have to have a special meeting. I get it. I'm in favor of it because it's the right thing to do, and it's the right step to take moving forward down the field.
Very good. Anyone else have any comments? So the motion is seconded to have a special council meeting a week from tonight at 7 p.m. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So we'll see you a week from tonight, but let's finish this meeting, right? Okay. Item B, Rules and Procedures Committee amendments, feedback on ordinances. I'll refer to the Rules and Procedures Committee.
So the Rules and Procedures Committee has had a couple meetings on these topics, and we've had some people come in to give feedback. We've had the former building inspector come in and give some insight on this. We had a number of questions for some of the counselors that presented this, and just wanted to get some understandings from those folks. I believe this is the amended ones with some edits from the town manager. They are ordinance D2 2017-001, general ordinance, vacant and abandoned commercial properties, and then D 2017-002, amend general ordinances, illegal dumping. So some of the things that Ms. Neary brought up as far as how are we going to enforce these things? Where is it going to be implemented? How are we going to make it better? Those are the same questions that we had. So we wanted to kind of, as we said, in the spirit of openness and transparency, get a lively discussion with all 9 of us to see what we can do, and then either put it back into this committee or maybe shift it to another once we've had a lively discussion. And Mr. Fitzgibbons or Mr. Wood, if you want to add anything.
Sure. And maybe we can take these one at a time.
Yeah, one at a time.
Because they're really separate subjects. So we'll
Start with the
start with the
001.
vacant and abandoned properties. So the challenge with this, and we already have one ordinance in place already. The challenge is, how do you define the building? How do you take action against it? Are there other things on the books already that the building inspector and others can use to take action when the building's dangerous, for example? And so the challenge is like the mobile station as a prime example. We all know that it's not a mobile station. We all know that there's no activity there. We all know that it's empty, but the owner is paying taxes, and he's decided not to do anything right now, and he could say it's for sale even though there's not a for sale sign on there. So the challenge is, if we put this in, with or without any changes, does it make sense for how to move forward with the town? Do we enable the building inspector and others to actually have more control over these issues? Do we create other issues involved? And I think we touched on a lot of those topics. So since we didn't have the sponsors at the meeting, we thought we'd bring it back to hear your opinions and what else was in this that we might have missed.
You got everything.
Okay.
Oh, and I will note that Mr. Andrew came to our meetings as well to provide some context. So, and we still had questions. And he also, provided some additional insights on things that we already have on the books that we might be able to implement later on.
Well, I think, as we have stated in the section 4 of the violations, we've got either potentially the health agent, the building inspector, and/or the fire chief could be potential people that would take action on these particular situations for any violations that would come about. So it's not squarely putting on one person's plate. So I do think that is a good thing. I think that we definitely have to come up with a protocol to take it one step at a time, whether it be issuing the warnings, the fines, and then if it certainly is not being addressed after that situation, where does the town go with it? And does it go to a court proceeding or things of that nature to get compliance on what we're asking for? And then that might not be specifically addressed in that, but I think that would probably be an additional thing that should be looked at. But I do feel that the appropriate people are listed here, being the health agent, the building inspector, and fire chief would be the point people to probably address those situations, with, I imagine, the building inspector being the one probably issuing the fines.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about the examples Mr. Moore gave. For example, section 3, number 5, pools of stagnant water. So he gave an example where a house, I don't know if it was off the market, on the market, whatever, it was empty, but it had a kiddie pool in the backyard. Summertime, stagnant water creates mosquitoes, so he took care of the problem. The pool was deflated, the pool was emptied because it was a safety hazard. So he already had tools on the books to take care of an issue. And he's cited a couple more. So it's not a matter of who would enforce it, but at what point do you decide that something needs to be enforced? So at what point, who can create the threshold? Have we defined the threshold well enough in this document to say, yes, clearly that piece of property meets the criteria of vacant and abandoned, and someone can take action against it? And that's the challenge. That's what we talked about a lot during the meetings, is when does it become, something other than a dangerous property? Because dangerous properties already can be cured with current laws that are sitting on the books. Housing authority, I think, was cited as one option. Maybe not housing authority. What was the? He talked about the housing court. Yeah, you can take an owner to housing court for violation of a number of different things, things that may fall under this, and that tool exists today.
With the housing court, if I may, there would obviously be costs involved in that we would not necessarily incur if we had a path relative to taking action on some of these items. I would guess, right?
I would assume.
And a couple of comments. One in regards to escalation. There's multiple offenses here, but there's no reference to escalation, as Dr. Perry had mentioned. And then with thresholds, abandoned commercial building, dilapidated, evidence of vacancy, those are all points to your point that we could have thresholds developed within this document that otherwise aren't there, correct?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Haley, you're hitting on kind of the stuff that we've heard in the committee, and I'd really focus on section 3, and I believe Mr. Moore brought this up, that, we say all property in the town of Bridgewater shall be maintained in accordance with the following property standards, and we have a bunch of lists, but number 4, accumulation of trash, rubbish, or debris All property shall be maintained in a clean and sanitary manner, free from accumulation of litter, rubbish, trash, or other debris, except enclosed receptacles intended for such use. And his point to us, and my other two colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, was, okay, now I have the neighbor from hell, and they're going to say, you know, my yard doesn't follow Section 4, so now you have to do something about it, building inspector or whoever. And so was that kind of the gist of part of the conversation we had?
Part of that, and also I think there was another case of where a neighbor complained about another neighbor about auto parts in the yard as an attractive nuisance and that sort of thing. And the guy was rehabbing classic Mustangs. So the parts themselves were rusted and sitting around the yard, but they were valuable on the market. So they weren't just litter, and they weren't just taking up spot. So again, a simple solution there, asked them to build a shed and store the parts in the shed, done deal, you know, cleaned up, that sort of thing.
And really, I think the tenor of the conversation, and again, both of my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, is we don't need a sledgehammer to kill a fly. And not saying that this issue is a fly, but we don't need a sledgehammer to do it. I don't know, is that fair?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? Mrs. Chairwoman? Mrs.
To
Chairwoman?
respond to Mr. Wood's question about who gets to decide and how do you, I mean, the particulars of when a property is a nuisance are not codified here. I mean, you might need, you know, a book 4 inches thick to actually codify it. And so admittedly, this does rely on the judgment of the enforcing official. And, you know, ideally that judgment won't be capricious or arbitrary, but fairly consistent. I think there is a need to provide the authority to protect property rights, to protect common interests. I mean, there's obviously a tension here between an individual's right to do with their property what they want, and then the rights of neighbors not to have to look at a heap of garbage on someone's front lawn. So, you know, where do you draw? The question is, where do you draw that line? Where's that line of where you compromise? I'm afraid our former building inspector has a little too much faith in neighborliness. So, Mr. Wood, in the scenario you present where someone's got auto parts in their front yard and they're, you know, unsightly, and, you know, so if the building inspector, whomever, goes, that person suggests they build a shed, and they say, no, I don't want to, then there's no authority to kind of compel them to get rid of the nuisance. So yes, we are relying on the judgment of a human being, an individual, to decide when something's a nuisance and not. I think we need to give our town officials that authority.
I guess if I may, I guess the larger question is do they already have the tools in the toolbox to do this without us making another ordinance that says it? That's the larger question. Does the building official and others have the right tools today, Mass General Law and others, to do the enforcement that needs to be done? And are we just repeating something that should already be enforced by those officials? That to me, that's the larger question.
So in your discussion with Mr. Moore about this, did he say that there was anything on Mass General Law that applies to that he can use in the town of Bridgewater?
So he gave one scenario, which I don't know if it applied to this one or the next one, but he took a homeowner to court over litter in the yard. The guy was a hoarder, and he took him to court, and the judge gave him 30 days to clean up the yard, and it didn't happen. So they went back to court, and the judge gave him another 30 days and a warning, said if you come back and you haven't complied with the order to clean up your yard, bring a toothbrush. So they went back to court for a third time, and the yard hadn't been cleaned up at all, and the judge put him in jail for 6 months. So what Mr. Moore said is he went to the prosecutor and says, well, what good does that do? It doesn't clean up the yard. And he says, well, go talk to the judge. Now, I'm paraphrasing here. And he went to talk to the judge, and the judge says, well, the law says that you brought him before the court, I found him guilty, and so he goes into jail for 6 months as the penalty. And Mr. Moore observed, but that doesn't clean up the yard. And I think that's the larger issue, is that even if you find, an issue and the person doesn't want to comply, as you're asking, what then? And maybe there's no simple answer.
Well, again, in the end run of things, I don't think, again, we want to jail people for littering, but I think if there's more monetary penalties that we can issue as a town, that could escalate, and then potentially taking to a housing court situation where action, could be forced to be made somehow, some way, might be a better avenue from a local level than taking it to a state level and having someone incarcerated over the situation. So I think to some degree, language is needed at a local level to help address this situation.
To your question, Mr. Moore did mention that there are a lot of things within the town that he can already enforce for a lot of these issues.
Okay.
Within our bylaws and things things that we already have on the books. So I think what we're trying to address may not be, we don't have this legislation, we may not have had the right people at a long term enforcing these things, and giving out the tickets and really holding accountable the person that came in today about, something was there for 2 days, he already got a ticket for $25. I think we're missing a little bit of that. So I think rather than taking up the sledgehammer, maybe looking at our internal department to see how we can assist them instead of giving them another piece of paper to enforce stuff that they may already have within their power to do.
Well, I think protocols could be developed by the building department, using this as a guide, at least giving them the fine structure. Potentially, they can determine whether I'm going to give you 7 days to comply, 30 days to comply, whatever it might be. It just basically addresses the fine structure without putting a timetable to it. And again, that's going to be at the discretion of the building inspector or fire chief or whoever else was on there originally. We had the health agent to address, and I think certainly this probably wouldn't have been created if there was not enough there in the books already to help address it. And again, we're looking at a lot of downtown properties, as you mentioned, the old mobile station. I drove by there today. Vegetation there is out of control, and the crumbling, concrete, and there's safety issues, there's vegetation issues. There's a lot of things that jump out at me as problematic that I think we need something for our town officials to hang their hat on, to at least, say, hey, you've got to send somebody here to address this issue. We're tired of looking at this in the state that it's in, and then you're going to start accumulating, fines here if something's not addressed. So we need something that kind of gets their attention, that allows them to, hopefully take action.
I'm aligned to that. I don't see that we don't already have that. Like, that hasn't been shown to me that, if you go through the 75 bylaws, that we don't already have that, and he or she cannot do that today. That's where I'm getting stuck.
Oh, go ahead.
So I guess what your committee is asking us to prove a negative. You're asking us to prove that legislation doesn't already exist, that we don't already have legislation on the books that does what this is trying to do. Mm-hmm. So you're asking us to prove a negative. It would kind of make more sense for those of you who are more skeptical about this legislation to say, well, here in fact is where we have the authority to do what this is trying to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So in a way, I think the onus is on you all to show that this is duplicative or redundant.
I want to exactly follow up on what Mr. Columbotus just said, because having sat here and listened, and this is why we brought it forward, because we wanted to hear a discussion about what the intent was, I think,
Right.
about the ordinance, and I don't think anyone's necessarily against it, but I'd ask that the town manager perhaps direct the Director of Community and Economic Development to tell us whether or not this does, in fact, duplicate where it expands upon, and those areas we can focus on. Where it's duplicative, we can take out and eliminate, because there's no need for them anymore. He's the expert in the town who understands, these type of issues, Obviously, you'd work with the town attorney to understand those, because I know he's not an attorney, but he does understand all the stuff relative to this. So maybe that would be a good thing for us to hear back at our next committee meeting from the town Community Economic Development Director on what are the key features, having heard this discussion from the sponsors, that we can, move forward on and say, yeah, these are the things that are new and different and moving us forward, rather than just restating or perhaps even going beyond or not doing enough than what we already have. That's my suggestion.
I think Mr. Fitzgibbons make a really good point in that while the three of us sponsored this legislation, we didn't draft it. And so probably the best advocate for it isn't here right now. So exactly that. We do need to make sure we get Mr. Diono, I think is how his name is pronounced.
That's why I
To
called
that
him
next meeting,
Community and
yes.
Economic Planning Director.
And we knew that,
Yeah.
right? We knew that, and, because I was the fourth that was asked if I wanted to sponsor this. And I rather like the language in the graffiti on private property clause. Graffiti is a separate issue, because it often indicates other activity in the area. It's just not someone with a can of spray paint. It sometimes indicates, drug activity or other things that, and that's why I've always been after the town manager every time someone tags the highway barn to get out the next day and cover it over. And
Or is it art? Maybe it's art.
it could be art. It could be art, but yeah, that's what we're hoping is that. And you're right. If it's said that there are tools in the toolbox, that should be explored. I'm not sure the council should do that exploration, but it should be identified that this is strong, this is weak, this is how we make the things fit well.
I know one quick thing. I know Mr. Moore is no longer working for the town, but maybe he could point out some of these points where this is redundant. Maybe you all could reach out to him and get
Well,
that.
again, that's
Just, Mr. Suze, that's.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. We can look at all the large things in town. When you look at the small things, the trash, we do have a lot of strips of land along our main arteries and other streets. There's no buildings on them, so they've open land. But just as many cars go by, and just as many Dunkin' Donuts coffee cups, and little liquor nips, and all kinds of debris gets thrown onto that side of the street. Okay? What do you do in that case? First of all, you have to catch the person throwing out the car. That's what the state says. All right? Other than that, there's nothing. And to come down and say, you own that 400 feet frontage over here, and somebody threw some trash out there. If you don't go pick it up, we're going to fine you. Is that going to work? That's what our little section of this thing says.
Barry?
Just going back to the subcommittee for further review, I'm suggesting that we probably, do you have another meeting date set to review this again, or is this based on tonight's discussion? Because my suggestion would be if we could have Mr. Diano and, if the prior building inspector was available to sit down together and discuss where it might overlap, where redundancies might be, that might help make some clarifications on the ordinance. And then, or would that something you like to see happen before you meet again, and then bring that information to your subcommittee? What would you guys suggest as the steps going forward on this?
So we've already had both of them come in. and
Okay,
we've had,
already
their feedback on both of these ordinances, and they weren't, I think what we're missing, to Mr. Columbotus's point, is the actual, this is where it says here, but we have it on page 6 here, and this is what this says here, and we have it on page 8 here. That's where I think where the disconnect is. There was no, we can definitely invite them again. Our next meeting is May 2nd at 7:30. So after our a special town council meeting will be meeting. I'm not sure their availability to come for next week because we had already invited them to come previously, but it might be helpful to have them come and speak to the whole council if everyone wants to hear and kind of pose their questions. So we can discuss and see what our best next
That
steps
could be
are.
something that potentially could add to that meeting. Wouldn't add a whole lot of time, I don't think.
Yeah, if they could make it next Tuesday, that would be great.
Plus, we have a new building inspector, maybe get his input too.
And his input, yeah.
Yeah, we can ask
Okay. I think
to
that would
have them
be,
come to the meeting.
no, the actual town council meeting and make it a further.
Oh, no, we
oh.
have a,
On May 9th or
we're
May 2nd?
going to schedule
Oh,
a
I'm sorry.
subcommittee after the regular, after the
After-
special
oh,
meeting.
okay, I'm sorry.
Which?
Both.
Well, that's what I thought you were saying at first, that we
Mr.
do
Perry
the,
was thinking if they could come to this meeting and have, or the special meeting to have the conversation with all 9 of us would be helpful, but we could also have them come to the subcommittee meeting at 7:30 and have the conversation again with the committee that had invited them.
So you want them to come to your meeting on the 2nd? The town council meeting, the special meeting that you just scheduled on the 2nd? You want them here for that?
If that works for
No, the
body.
Rules and Procedures Committee meeting on the 2nd at 7:30.
Just the Rules and Procedures Committee,
And then come to the town council meeting on the 9th
the 9th?
after that.
Absolutely. Okay.
Am I correct? I
can
don't
do it
wanna
that way
speak
as
for the
well.
Chairperson.
No, that's not what Kevin had.
no,
Mr.
but that's fine, if that's
Yeah.
the
Well, I'd
the
like
order
to
that you're
hear 'em
looking for, that's
before
fine
we
by me.
Go back out to the
Come
larger
back to the
party.
full council, so
That's fair.
we've been dealing with it for a while now, and
Well, that's fine, whatever works for the subcommittee is certainly what I'm
We'll
striving
invite
for.
them for the 2nd, and then we will invite them for the 9th if the 2nd does work.
Works for me.
And I think that might give a little bit more time to these gentlemen to do the, where's the state, where's existing legislature, compare and contrast. Forgive my ignorance, but I would have assumed that some of that work was done before we even started to look at it, and to Mr. Columbotus's point is that we didn't sponsor it, but we are on it to push it through and to work with it. And maybe it is my ignorance that I don't have the answers to what may be existing already that we need to add teeth to. I like this. We could reel it in a bit, add some more detail to it, but we'll see what happens.
Good discussion.
And then we have the illegal, yeah.
You're gonna say, is it more of the same with the illegal
I was
dumping?
just going to say that.
Can I just ask if the town manager has any input on this?
Sure.
No. No, I mean, I agree with really all the comments. I'd make all the same similar comments that have been made here, but I have asked Andrew and our town attorney to take a look and see what options, specifically what options are available to us, either in existing ordinances, and I don't think there are many, but existing ordinances, but more importantly on a statewide level, just what are the actual options available. So we'll have a good discussion on the 2nd and then the 9th as well.
Can we do a couple bullet items on the litter as well then? Can we do a couple bullet items on litter? So the challenge that Mr. Souza was talking about is that, when someone takes Dunkin' Donuts cup away from Dunkin' Donuts, it no longer belongs to Dunkin' Donuts. And when someone throws it out the window and it lands on someone else's property, it's not owned by the person of that property either, although it's sitting on their property. And this also covers some vegetation over sidewalks and things like that. But the challenge is who owns the litter, who's responsible for it. We talked months ago about, large pieces of furniture sitting on sidewalks or neighbors. So in my area, and one of those discussions was about stuff that was obviously dropped off here, there, and the next spot, because Mill Street had the dining room table, but the matching chairs were over on Whitman Street, and the matching sideboard was over on Hayward Street, and another recliner was out on in front, 2 doors down from my street, so my house. So it becomes whose issue is it? If it's sitting on the sidewalk, is it the issue of the town? If it's sitting back from the sidewalk, is it the issue of the property owner? And how do you go about doing that? So in concept, I want to support something like this, but in execution, it's difficult to say who's responsible for it at that point. Do we cause, because someone dumped a lazy boy in front of someone's house, do we force that person to take that to a transfer station and
On their nickel.
and pay $20 to throw it away? Or is there something else that we're missing here? And I agree, the nips are horrible, and I'll tell you why. I think it's an issue. I observed this myself. It was getting close to New Year's, so I was in Bridgewater Liquors, getting a bottle for New Year's, and a young woman came in behind me, and she grabbed 2 fistfuls of nips out of right there on the counter, and she bought them, she put them in the bag. She had parked behind me outside the door, and while I was checking my phone, she consumed 1 bottle and threw it out. So I'm not saying that's why they're all on the roadside, but if she gets stopped, she's got 9 closed bottles, not 1 open bottle. And so while she's really drinking and driving, she wasn't going to have an open bottle. And I'm wondering now, without evidence, I'm wondering now how often that happens, and maybe that's why I see a lot of nips in front of my house all the time.
Yeah, I do it all the time.
I would venture to guess there's no other reason to see nips around the edges of the streets.
So this will go back to the committees, and there'll be more discussion down the road. Mr. Columbotus.
I'd just like to make one point. I think these are really, really important pieces of legislation, and that we should take our time, and it might seem like drudgery or a lot of work to kind of go hash it over again and again, but I think I just want to make sure we don't rush it and just reject it outright or ram it through, and just take our time.
Well, and
that was the whole point of us bringing it back, was to do that.
I applaud that, yeah.
I agree, but the main issue would really come down to enforcement. That's really what it will all come down to, because I will tell you, if somebody left a refrigerator on their front lawn and did not take the door or freezer door off, somebody of an official capacity in this town would be in front of that house within hours or minutes.
That's a safety.
That's the same, you're right, it's a safety issue. The same with, I mean, I know having a couch is not a safety issue, or having a chair is not a safety issue, but these items should be treated like that, because it's an enforcement issue. And like I tell you, if somebody left a hinged refrigerator in front of their house, somebody with enforcement powers in this town would be in front of that house within hours. And perhaps that's the type of enforcement we will need to make sure that these ordinances are effective. May be harsh, but it may be needed.
What's the story with fire hydrants? Is that an actual thing where you're responsible to shovel out the fire hydrant if it's
Yes.
in your property?
Correct.
So why should this be any different?
True. Okay, we will have this discussion. We will continue this discussion. And we will have another discussion on draft paid parking ordinance. I don't know who's sponsoring this, but it's being brought forth by the town manager.
Well, this is, Mr. President, this is the first time we sort of are trying out a new method of introducing or potential legislation by sort of bringing it to the council and at least articulating what it is, why it might be needed, and then actually soliciting potential sponsors. So I think we talked about this a little bit. I can't remember if it was in relation to something that we either passed or didn't pass over the last few months. So this is sort of what we'll attempt to do in the future, is bring legislation. If we've got the time, bring it forward and get some comments and suggestions and so forth. So let me just run through this a little bit. We have talked on the transportation, what used to be the traffic committee, for some time about this concept of adopting a paid parking program. The idea being that it sort of begins to formalize parking, number one, can provide appropriate parking for those, mostly targeted to those using BSU in some capacity, either staff, students, professors, whatever, who for some reason haven't gotten a campus sticker or haven't paid, for a semester at a private parking facility. So this, hopefully, instead of writing lots of tickets, will provide the ability for us to create a revenue source that would go specifically for parking-related issues or downtown-related issues. We could generate revenue, for instance, to use for striping crosswalks. We could generate revenue to offset the cost of engineering of additional parking in and around town, whether that be a parking garage or parking lot or something of that nature. But I think more importantly, it provides a safe and legal option for effectively mostly students to be able to park on-street and certain off-street areas without fear of getting a ticket. And I think that's probably a sort of a healthy, mature thing to do at this point for Bridgewater. The ordinance itself, before we would go, and let me backtrack and say, you know, if we adopted something like this in a form similar to what you see in front of you, we would go out and do an RFP for a private entity. You know, they're all over. They're all in cities, Brockton, Taunton, you name it, wherever there's a paid parking program. But we go out to bid on an RFP. They would provide the equipment, they would provide, you know, the servicing, they would provide all of it, and essentially take a fee and then leave us with the balance of the revenue. It would likely mean a small drop in the number of parking tickets or the value or the money that we collect from parking tickets, but I think universally, internally, we agree that this is a better option rather than being the ticketing police. But I'll just run through it very quickly. It would provide two metered zones. One would be School Street, basically the length of School Street. The other would be a portion of Spring Street on the southwesterly side. It would also provide a metered zone in the Spring Street parking lot, which is down, I think we all know it's down sort of opposite the tracks from Burger King. It's the lot that looks like it should be a university lot and is not. So in September, lots of kids park there. We issue lots of tickets, and by October, there's nobody parking there ever. It's a completely empty lot. So we know, just based on the tickets we write and the amount of kids in the university lots down there, that there's a demand for parking, and I think we could easily fill that lot on a daily basis. Anyway, the Spring Street lot and then the town parking lot, which is how we refer to the parking in the rear of the town hall on the east side of Central Square. So one of the things that revenue from a parking ordinance can go to is to actually improve the lots. We have set aside some money to do some improvement in the town lot, which is quite frankly a mess. We've got a plan to restripe it and provide better pedestrian access back into the university from that lot, as well as into Central Square. So that's basically, those are basically the locations. I won't even call it a first phase, because really those are the only locations we've really established. And I think if you look at them, there's not any negative impact to residents in Bridgewater. The Central Square remains free parking. Every other street where we allow parking remains free parking. Obviously timed so that you can't spend all day there, whether it's 45 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. It is timed, but at least we can establish a program. It's initially be a small program, but I think internally we would recommend that the council look at something like this. We wouldn't be looking at hours, weekend hours or holiday hours. We'd only be looking at Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. At least that's what we've proposed. And we don't, we've proposed a 50-cent per half hour a meter fee, and we don't think that that's excessive. I think other towns similar to us are more in the dollar range, and sometimes more than that. So that's just, I'll sort of throw that out to the council for any comments or anything you might say.
When you say "we," who's "we"?
We, meaning
You.
meaning me?
Yeah.
And Andrew.
I guess
The royal we.
you said we looked at. Who's the we in this plan?
The Transportation Committee, Andrew Diono, has done a lot of work and research on paid parking programs. The university has weighed in. They think it's actually a good idea. It provides a little bit of relief, from their parking office. So internally, I'd say that's the we, Transportation Committee, Andrew, University.
How would this? You said this would be a better way to generate revenue than writing parking tickets. How so?
I think we would acknowledge that we've got areas in town, anybody can park there. We can set parameters on time, but ultimately we're saying, please park here. This is an acceptable place to park, and you can park for 4 hours, just to use an example. I think that's, from my perspective, a little bit friendlier an approach than, 15-minute parking. We're going to send somebody around, in circles, and if you're there for longer than 15 minutes, we got you. It also relies on the company to offset the cost of any tickets that we would write in the paid parking area. So it sort of frees up what's now our police department from having to write tickets.
So the southwest side of Spring Street, that would consist of Brianna's, the Beach Armed, and the Bridgewater Bagel for businesses. Is that the southwest part of Spring Street?
Southwest part of Spring Street, I
Across the
believe
street.
you're right. Yeah, it wouldn't be in front of those. It would be on the other side. of the street.
That's where everybody
Yeah, it's
parks.
cut-
It's across the street.
There's a cutout already, apparently.
Right. And there would be meters there.
Right.
Right. That's where everybody parks. So I'd have to pay, in the morning, I would have to pay to park
There's a
to go
parking
get
lot.
my coffee in the morning.
If you get there before 8.
Or 8
you don't
o'clock?
have to.
You
don't
can
know.
park in the parking lot,
And it's
no?
on weekends.
As you can see, I'm not really in favor of this. But if somebody here wants to sponsor it, good luck to you. Go ahead, Bill.
So just some background. So about a year ago, Andrew and I walked around town because I was interested in the parking committee. And that's why I was putting forward the idea of having a parking committee to study things like this from a resident's point of view, not from a council's point of view, not from the university's point of view. Putting meters down there, I think is problematic for the businesses. In fact, I was thinking of encouraging that the time allowed, which is 45 minutes right now, be extended to like an hour, because you can't go into Brianna's and get back to your car in under 45 minutes. So they do ticket down there, right? And so the only way that parking would work, parking meters, I mean, is if you threaten enforcement. So a college student is going to park at a parking meter, and if he or she knows that they're not going to get ticketed, they're not going to put 50 cents in at all, right? And so the enforcement today, in all the spots that we're talking about, have limits on parking. There's 45 minutes on Spring Street. There's 45 minutes in the municipal lot. School Street, I don't think has any parking. I can easily see meters on School Street, but then you could extend the argument and say, well, let's do Grove Street too, and Summer Street in front of the, university, maybe Park Avenue, and elsewhere. And then there's other concepts like the lot that you spoke about, which is a municipal lot at the end of Spring Street. Has anyone talked about selling that to the university? So they extend their parking area into it. I know a lot of students don't pay for the parking permit, even though there's a space over in the garage for them, because it's $200 a year. If they're not willing to pay $200 a year, why would they pay $4 to park on School Street to go to class? What's going to happen is they're going to go to Stetson Street, they're going to go to, Hale Street, they're going to go someplace else that they can go. So I think we're going to push the problem around a little bit without, and I'm glad we're doing this in this format discussion before we actually do a first reading or anything, because especially in the municipal lot, it's hard enough to figure out where you're supposed to park. Never mind then beating someone over the head that if they don't park on, Central Square, but decide to go behind the building, now they have to pay money to go get, brunch or go get a juice mill or something else. I don't know. I'm not really, I'm on the fence about this concept in general, because I was told a couple years ago Bridgewater has plenty of parking. And so now we're going to lock it down because we're not enforcing the parking that we have with the limits that we have, because we don't have a traffic cop, a parking cop to go around and ticket the ones that exceed those limits already. That's why I'm not, that's the other side of the fence for me.
Well, I would only, I want to make couple clarifications. I don't want anybody to think we're not enforcing parking currently. We do, and we are quite aggressive about it, judging by the number of ticket appeals that we have coming into the office, which is only a small percentage of the tickets that actually get paid. But I think in this scenario, what I meant by not having to enforce parking with our police department is that the private entity that we hire to do this system does that policing. It's in their interest, because absolutely they get paid based upon the amount of paid parking that gets used. So they want people to be paying to use that parking. So there's a mechanism there, sort of a push to make sure that people don't think they can just cruise up to a paid parking space and park there for an hour or two, without paying. But I hear your point. I certainly hear your point about Spring Street. I get that. The lot. I think if what we're being told is correct, the value of specifically that Spring Street lot to us as an ongoing income generator, which it would be, is far greater than the sales value that we could get if we just wanted to option it off or sell it back to the university, sell it to the university.
Mr. Perry?
So you had also said, so all equipment costs, all meters itself, that would be supplied by the company and it wouldn't have any out-of-pocket expense for the town.
Correct.
And you said the policing of it would also be done by this company, not by our own police department. And I understand what you're saying as far as a friendlier way of going, again, because no one obviously likes to get, tickets. Certainly it's a more negative, punishment-based type situation that we'd like to avoid. I'm thinking, though, strategy-wise, if you were to look at doing this, I don't think you can potentially look at the back parking lots here and there, because I know a lot of the trouble we used to have in the past when we did have parking enforcement was with the central parking around the Common, around Central Square, along Route 18, things of that nature. So, like most, Brockton and Taunton surrounding communities that do have parking meters, I think we're probably looking at doing around the Common and doing along the corridors of Route 18 and things of that nature, those main areas where you might have more trouble, but it might be easier to get those types of meters to work in that area as opposed to back parking lots and things like that. I still think, again, the back parking lot in the center of town, the town parking lot could be a potential area, and School Street, again, like was mentioned, I think the Spring Street might be more of a difficult, but the parking lot itself could be something like the T does by the T. So, but I think you might have to, if you're going to do these meters, you're going to probably have to be a little bit more expansive than those just few areas in order for it to work as a whole. So you're going to have to kind of go all the way or not do it at all.
I see your point, but I think one of the we wouldn't. I don't. Again, I wouldn't want. We're trying. What we're trying to do here is to begin to create a revenue stream that we can use to improve parking lots, to do the stuff that we have to do at some point. Make capital, investments or just plain old maintenance.
I think you're just going to have to include probably Central Square and surrounding areas that have street side parking, like along 18 and things of that nature, in order for it
But
to work.
part of me would love to do that because it would be additional revenue, but I think what we're trying to do is not impact residents. I mean, residents are the ones that invariably are using the spaces in front of the juice place, the spaces in front of, the coffee place, the Better Bean. So we're not, this isn't an effort to try to adversely impact residents. This is acknowledging that there are folks that use the university, and I'll give you a good example. I had a ticket appeal the other day. It was a woman who had been away from BSU. Obviously, all her parking had lapsed. She'd come back to pick up courses. I can't remember why she'd been away, but came back to pick up courses sort of midstream. She only comes to BSU, twice a week for a couple hours, and she didn't want to have to buy whatever the cost of a semester ticket is. It's like her sticker for BSU was $200 and some odd. She didn't want to have to do that. So she was just trying to park on the street, get to her class for 2 hours and get out. So, for folks like that, this is a perfect option. I mean, they can 50 cents, whatever the rate may be, it's going to be a couple dollars, to park, but they know that they're not going to get a $20, $25 ticket. And they know that they can park there. It's available. It's a destination. It's easy. You can pay for it with a phone app and be off. But that's sort of the market that we're kind of looking at. People that commute in easy, they can park if they've got classes at the Hunt School. They're right there. They don't have to truck all the way down to the parking lots or all the way down to the garage and then have to hike all the way across campus. And to their credit, the university is trying to, encourage that, but it hasn't quite taken on. But for those areas that aren't metered, so the Central Square, Stetson, 18, Broad Street, and so on, we'll still make sure that, we'll still patrol those and make sure that there's turnover, that people aren't parking there longer than necessary. That's still, that we do that now. We continue to do those areas. But the parking, paid parking program give people, mostly, as I say, mostly students, an option of being able to park, get to their class without having to fear getting a ticket.
I see just, if anyone else has a comment or credit.
I'm unclear. So how long would the period be that one could park at the meters?
We haven't gotten that far. We haven't.
All
determined
for
that.
I think the point that I think Mr. Wood brought up is that it's kind of like fluid dynamics. If you squeeze in one place, you're going to get, like Mr. Wood said, someone parking on Stetson. And so unless you clamp down on that also, and it seems like there's got to be some advantage to parking at the meter, that you could stay for 2 hours as opposed to only being able to stay for 45 minutes in front of Central Square. If it's just an hour, if it's the same amount of time at the meter as it is for free, you're gonna squeeze people over to the free parking and create a burden there for, a load there where people won't be able to shop, people who are just going to class. So it seems like, I'm wondering if we shouldn't have a parking. It seems kind of complicated, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't step back and get kind of a better grasp on all these dynamics and some sort of report or study from
Ms. Loesch?
community development.
Go ahead, Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Just a few questions, I guess. Is there parking on School Street now? Is that legal?
There is very short-term parking on School Street now.
And what's the rationale for that?
That's a good question.
Okay,
I
so
think it's-
I think it's 30 minutes, so it's not.
Because Boyden is an administrative hall, and they have to go in and pay their bill, or they have to go in and do other activity within Boyden that needs a few minutes, so they park there.
no, I understand. I understand why you might only be there for a short time, but if it's legal to park there, and we're going to make it legal to park for a very long time, I know it's not right now.
Right.
So there has to be a reason, or else we're being dumb. So I'd like to assume we're not being dumb. Okay, second, the lot behind the town hall and whatnot. Tell me about the Bridgewater resident parking that you can have there.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, it's only open to Bridgewater residents, right? With a Bridgewater resident sticker, correct?
No,
Not
actually,
anymore?
the parking right now back there, which is a mess, but right now, we put employees back there, which hopefully will end relatively soon. Firefighters park there with a sticker, and then we grant stickers to the business owners on Central Square in order to park there. But we don't issue a ticket.
So where will all those folks park once we monetize that parking lot?
They could continue to park there.
Without having to pay?
Correct.
So we're cutting that in half or more, okay. What about the lot across the tracks from Crispy's, the dirt lot? Who owns that?
I believe the MBTA still owns that.
Okay, thank you. And why not, if it's more attractive to have students for a couple hours park in the town lot behind the old town hall, why wouldn't we get a premium because they're just going to the Hunt School and they're really happy about that, rather than discounting it from what they have to pay at the college? Those are some of the questions I have.
That's a good question. I mean, if somebody, if we could compete in the sticker world, that might be an option. I think this was just a way to provide an option for students, a paid option for students that we thought that they would pick up and take.
No, I get it. I'm just, those are my questions. I didn't expect you to have all the answers.
What other towns use this vendor?
Pardon?
Which other towns use this vendor?
There is no vendor yet. I mean, the process would be if the council were interested in continuing to have this discussion, we would flesh out some of the issues associated with the draft RFP, and then get that vote, or I'm sorry, making everybody confused. The draft ordinance, you'd need an ordinance before you could adopt, before you could really implement a paid parking program. Once the ordinance is adopted, then we would go out and issue an RFP and find a vendor that would respond to the RFP. But we have a number of different vendors that we've, reached out to that certainly have expressed interest.
I was in Plymouth and there was a talk to, I can't remember, it seemed like they have a new parking system and it is a private vendor there. And the city is really kind of, doesn't have any direct responsibility for it. So it seems to be working there.
I've paid several tickets to the town of Plymouth or to that private agency. It's handled very well, 15-minute increments, and there is not a free parking spot in Plymouth in the downtown area. I would love to find out the revenue that's being created there. It's I worked down on the waterfront for some time during the introduction of the parking. Quite a good time. And they also reduced some of the fire lanes that people would park in the restaurant industry. And they're like, you can't park there. There were alleys turned into fire ways. At any rate, how many spaces are we talking about, Michael?
That's a good question. I think we have a plan that allows for more than 50 spots in the what we call the town parking lot. I think we have a plan that looks at about 70 spaces on School Street. And then I don't recall the number of spaces in the Spring Street lot. And then if we were to do Spring Street itself, I don't believe there are that many spaces there. But I want to say the Spring Street lot might be about 25, somewhere in there.
And that's the question. So is it, we're going to lose some through ticketing and make some, however that gets a percentage of it from the paid parking. And is that enough to entice one of these companies? I mean, is it enough lots? And what's the cost? Is it even going to be attractive?
Right.
Evidently it is. I haven't spoken with them directly. I know Andrew's reached out to a number of them, and Yeah, they're very interested.
And the recurring theme is we're talking about, you know, the college population, not necessarily the towns. We don't want to impact our people that, and we have that booming area around the common, and that's a joke, we're not booming yet. And we certainly don't want to deter that against your point, I suppose, if you need to meter that area down Broad Street or around the common. I like the idea of metered parking, even though I was negatively affected by it for some time, in combination with sticker type parking. It's a nice option as far as if you routinely go to areas at certain times within the time span. Get a reduced sticker, not a $200 one for a student. But a balance would be nice. Also, the students have a big fancy garage that they don't populate fully because that's too long of a walk. I don't think anybody in Stetson or Mr. Candido's neighborhood are going to have to worry about college kids making that trek far longer from there than it is from the garage that they don't use as regularly as they could or should. One question is in regards to the 8 to 8, that's just also kind of a suggestion, or is you think that's tied into the revenue? So if we take off a couple of hours, will that make it less attractive to the private? Because 8 o'clock, that's good revenue, but pretty late for a metered parking spot. Those are just my inputs. Kind of like Mr. Fitzgibbon's. That's just my questions. Don't have to be answered now.
And I also think that, none of us have even mentioned anything about businesses and the impact this would have on businesses. And I know there are plans on shelves we keep talking about of developing and revitalizing our downtown area. I think that needs to happen first before we start planning to say, okay, well, let's have everybody pay to park in certain spaces around the downtown. I see the business. I like if somebody on this council is going to sponsor this, and it goes into a committee. I think the business owners, particularly in the downtown area, that whether they're going to have a meter in front of their storefront or not, I think should be very involved in whether they think this is a good idea or the process in which it should be developed and so forth. So, but having said that, I guess this is kind of out of the ordinary because we're discussing an unnamed ordinance at the moment, and we've never really done that. So I know it's an idea from the town manager and his people, and I don't know. The next step would be to either.
I'd recommend that every counselor, and Mr. Columbotus is going to speak after me, I'm sure, but every counselor go back and think about it, and do they want to sponsor it? And maybe Mr. Columbotus is going to speak up and say he wants to sponsor it.
Mr. Gallagher, you seem concerned about this might hurt business. I could also see it being that having a meter in front of a business would create turnover of a spot, whereas now perhaps you've got someone sitting there for 2 hours, and so perhaps that's a benefit to business. And that seems like there's some facts that we don't really have. I mean, I don't know what, people have studied this, and I'm sure there's data on the effect of meters on businesses. So I think we need more information, I guess, is the
I agree.
short of what I'm saying.
And just in addition, again, I think in the process of trying to improve the downtown businesses, funding that this might generate might give us the money to make those improvements, to improve the beautification of the downtown, to improve on crosswalk and things of that nature. So that revenue generated could specifically go to that particular situation, which again would enhance business and would enhance, things going forward. Right now, we don't have a funding source to do the plans that we want to do for the downtown business district.
I hear what you're saying, but I'd like to see some cost
I certainly agree.
estimates on that, because you're losing the power to write a ticket right away.
Oh, certainly all those numbers have to be
You're going to be
crunched.
paying a vendor that's probably going to get 80 to 90% of the money.
That I'd have to see the percentages.
And then if they go over their time allotted, now you can give them a ticket. So it's I'd love to see it.
There's more work that needs to be looked into, for sure.
If they go over the 4 hours, then you can write them a ticket. Mr. Wood?
So I'd like to see a lot more data, too.
I agree.
But to the point about the garage, there's a shuttle bus that runs all the time. No one has to hoof it across campus. And it's as likely that they're going to be in the Moakley Center for a class as they are over at Grove Street for a class. So, and if you sit at Meeking or Cumberland Farms there for a very short time in the morning, you see a kid park his car, grab his backpack, and head toward the center of town. You think he's going to a laundromat to clean clothes? I don't think so. So the reason I want to have the parking group to have all these discussions and kind of go, and we haven't even talked about, in fact, there is municipal parking at Meeking. I think there's how many spaces? 15? So that's a municipal lot on the Broad Street side. That, where the partition is, facing the street is municipal parking. It is not the property owner parking. At Burger King, I believe there's 10 spaces in the lot facing Broad Street that were at trade. And of course, no one can find the paperwork, so but we're a trade for the changes that were made on Broad Street because there was a bump out and there were spaces lost on Broad Street there. So I think you have to look at all parking, not just a couple of these spots when considering, because you're going to end up with, I think the liquidity factor is you push down in one spot. The woman that paid the parking ticket didn't want to pay for a parking space at the Unitarian Church, which is cheaper than the college. Didn't want to pay for college, and didn't have any friends that she could park in the driveway. So she took her chance every single day until she got a ticket. And I bet if you ask the college, and you should, how much money do they get from parking tickets on their own campus? I think that may be separate from what the town sees, but it would be a good number to see to kind of size up what the issue is. Yeah, and the MBTA, yeah. And that lot isn't ours, right? So I know Crispy's, the owners take care of that lot.
I meant the one at the rail station.
Rail station too, yeah. But at Crispy's, we use that as a municipal parking lot to support those businesses. And Crispy's goes and puts gravel in the potholes after it rains and whatnot. But there is a chance that the T could come back for whatever reason and shut down that lot. And then we have to rethink parking in that area too. So I think it's wider than just a couple streets and the space behind it. And we kind of need to understand the impact financially of tickets versus revenue from meters and what might happen. You could end up with an empty lot that, no one uses the meters, once they're installed, which is kind of similar to it's an empty lot because no one knows how to park there because there's, growth over the signs and the signs are faded and whatnot.
Well, I think I've heard, pretty good.
Heard enough.
No, that's for you to say. No, I've heard what the council needs, and I'll get some more data and more numbers and come back and we'll have follow-up discussions.
Well, I'd like to see, I can't tell you what to do, but I don't think you should do anything until somebody sponsors this. That's what I think, but that's just my thoughts.
I'm sorry,
You
Mr.
go
Haley,
first. If it's pertinent to that, absolutely.
Is there any point to making an informal vote saying we'd like to see further study of this? And you're suggesting he shouldn't.
Well, if you think that that's appropriate, why don't you just pick up the sponsorship of it and
I want to.
We do have a parking study committee.
It has 0 members, so I wanted 5 on there, and I figured people who lived in this general area, that visit downtown often, would be interested in talking about that and studying that, but it's not marijuana, so it didn't get any interest.
I can bring this to the marijuana committee if you want.
I don't know if
Mr. Geller, you're suggesting perhaps Mr. Dutton should not spend time looking into this until someone sponsors it, right?
Or it goes to the committee that's been established to look at parking.
And I would suggest that I think there's a consensus here that we'd like Mr. Dutton to look at parking as an overall issue, even though we might not be willing to sponsor this.
Don't disagree with that.
So I hope Mr. Dutton carries that sentiment forward and goes ahead and provides more data.
Yeah, To your point, I think this is actually a good forum, that now he's heard all the feedback, he can do the due diligence and come with an actual ordinance that has all the, like, it all buttoned
What
up.
we're asking for.
As we can see from the littering and other things, when we don't have all the pieces together, we tend to flounder. So I say carry forth the torch and do your research, because this was a great discussion, and then you can then find a counselor to then sponsor your actual legislation. So I don't know if that's bad or not.
I have a question for the town manager. Where in your goals for the year was drafting a parking ordinance?
I took the initiative to
If you can fit it under any of them, let me know, okay? I appreciate that.
revenue generation, non-tax
perfect.
revenue generation.
Lose revenue. You don't know it's going to generate.
All right, thank you.
That's
As
what
long as you can fit it in, then we can check off the box. That's all I need to know.
I think there's other things to do, that's all. But you have something you say?
Well, I would just, to answer Mr. Fitzgibbons, I think was it a goal to foster economic development downtown?
Yeah.
And he
think it fits there.
needs to show the
Right.
nexus between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not about this, it's about, hey, let's introduce this and have a discussion about it. Several meetings ago, we, and had a discussion about the fact that we need to do this. and What's
Right.
the best method? Not necessarily that when the town manager brings it up, should he declare what bucket that's going to go in for his review process. But it's really good to get a discussion going, and it's nice to be able to have this instead of going through the Ms. Loesch's point, the back and forth and the seemingly cement-filled process that we can get stuck in here. And it's what, unofficial discussion or an official, semi-official discussion?
Strategic discussion.
It's nice. I like this. It's refreshing. So please,
I concur.
let's continue with this.
I concur.
Everybody all set?
We're good.
Yep.
All right,
All
what's
set.
next
Well
on the
done.
agenda?
Committee reports.
Committee reports. Any committees here tonight wish to give a report on their committee?
Budget and Finance, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
We continue to move through the budget review process. We're going to meet again next Monday, and I think anybody that wants to see the draft is now up on the website. Is that right, Michael?
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, so if anyone has questions or anything else, now's the time. It's balanced. We're going through the details. Last night it was about the enterprise funds. Before that it was about the general fund. We listened to the accounting team talk about the strategy of some of the items that are in there. We talked about the things that we can't do this year, and the process is coming forward. Thanks.
Excuse me, what time is that meeting?
Next week it should be 7 o'clock.
In this building?
Yeah, right here.
Ms. Loesch?
Rules and procedures. We had a great discussion about two of the ordinances that are in our wheelhouse currently, and we're wrapping up the changes to the charter. We're nearly done. So that should be coming back to the council, and then it will go, up to Boston and then back to the ballot for our town to vote on. But it is getting there, and we are excited to make some changes.
What is your time frame as far as getting to a ballot?
It really depends on when it comes back. It most likely will be next April, but unless we decide to do a special, so it's really up to what we decide we think would be best.
June 10th, the tour?
Yeah, we'll just throw it in on that one, and it'll be a write-in. But
Ballpark,
yeah, that's what we're thinking. Just so we give enough time. We're still going to move forward through the summer, get it up there. We're not going to wait until next year. Just kind of have it all buttoned up from our perspective, so when the ballot comes around, everyone knows what to expect.
Can I pitch an idea that I had last night? Because we're in a large format now, and then if we hear a little bit of feedback, we could take it back to the committee. The Finance Committee is missing 2 people. So it should be a group of 9. It's a group of 7. Last night, they didn't get quorum until halfway through the meeting. They're having trouble making quorum. So the idea I had, because things like transfers are held up by the Finance Committee. The budget won't be, but transfers and other articles like that are. So one of the ideas, and it's not in the review, and we haven't really talked about it before, but is that maybe for the Finance Committee, we make the majority be the majority of those appointed, rather than a majority of none, or a majority of those present with a quorum. So that if they can make quorum based on how many are appointed, and they have a majority based on how many are appointed, then they can vote and continue moving things like transfers through. Just an idea. We can talk about it in committee. If anyone has any feedback about that, it'd be good to hear.
Any other committee reports? Moving on to legislation for action, there's nothing. Old business, ordinance 2017-005, amend the administrative code, the Historic Commission membership. At their meeting on April 11th, 2017, the Rules and Procedures Committee voted unanimously to recommend adoption of this measure with amendments. This measure requires advertising pending the adoption of the amendments before finally considering.
Motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? There's a second.
Motion to amend as indicated.
Second.
Motion to amend as indicated. There's a second. Any discussion on the amendments?
I'll defer to the chairperson to explain the amendment, but it's essentially to try to make sure what Mr. Wood just suggested, that they always be able to have a quorum for a meeting.
Yes, aligned.
So all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So the amendment is adopted. There is a motion and a second to approve the,
Send advertising.
to send advertising. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh,
Go ahead.
is there going to be discussion on that? Send advertising?
There's a motion and a second for advertising. There's a discussion?
I have some discussion.
Discussion, okay.
How many members are on the Historical Commission now? 3?
3, and they're going to go to 5, I believe.
Back to 5.
And the rationale was what? What was the rationale?
It was having,
They don't want to go on the Finance Committee.
it was just to get more involvement and have quorum. So if they were having more people to be involved in the group 5, they can get 4 people to come instead of having 3 and only getting 1 person to come. You can't do a lot of things with 2 people. So just trying to widen the net. And it was always 5 when we had made updates to the admin code. Through the volunteer crisis that we're going through, we're realizing we weren't getting as many people, so we cut a lot of those committees. This was one of them, and they've asked us to come back and say, 5 is a really good number for us, and we would like it to be able for them to get what they have to get done.
Also, if I can, so this commission is responsible for part of the demolition ordinance. So if they can't meet, it puts a further delay
Yes,
in the
that too.
process for that.
Yeah, it's already happened, yes.
Okay,
So, a minute. Yeah, I had spoken about this earlier. One of the things that we have been planning for our building across the street, the memorial building, eventually when it's done, is to move all their belongings into there so they can open it up and show it to the public, all the artifacts and the historical things that they have. And David said, with the number of people they have, just 3, that's going to be kind of difficult with everything else that they're involved in. But if they had a few extra people, then you'd have more opportunity to have somebody to be there during those few hours on those couple of days a week when people can come in and visit the site. That was part of it as well with the demolition thing, if that stays.
there's a motion, there's a second to send it to advertising. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that goes to advertising. New business, order 2017-019, affix the town clerk's salary for fiscal 18. And we had this discussion last year. We have this discussion again this year. I am sponsoring this one to affix the town clerk's salary to $65,000 effective July 1. And if you've all taken a look at the budget for this year, there was a complete human resources study done on a lot of salaries in this town, and the town manager has explained the need for the study and the need to adjust several salaries in this town effective July 1. And I'm sure we'll have that discussion when we vote on the budget in a couple of weeks. But, and not to, I will pretty much paraphrase what I asked him last night, and what his answer was, is that the human resources study that was done, the compensation classification study that was done a couple years ago, you know, does indicate that there are several positions in the town of Bridgewater that we're not paying appropriately compared to towns our size, compared to the responsibility, and so forth. And I've always agreed with that. I've always agreed that we do. We tend to do that. So there are many adjustments being made in the fiscal 18 budget to increase salaries for several positions, several key positions in this community. So it's not his responsibility to bring forward the one that reflects our town clerk. It's up to us. So in the wage and compensation study that was done, the town clerk average was up to 85,000 to a low of about 70,000. Average high was about 70 to 85,000 with the low of about 60 for a town clerk of our size. So I think if we are going to adjust salaries for key positions in this community, which I agree with, I think that the town clerk is a key position in our community as well. And I think that that position does deserve a salary that's competitive to other town clerks in the area. So that's the rationale for this order, because it's our job to set the salary for our town clerk and our council clerk. Mr. Fitzgibbon.
I'd make a motion to refer to the Budget and Finance Committee and the Finance Committee.
Second.
There's a motion and there's a second. Is there any discussion to refer it?
Just
Yep.
a little bit more. I don't disagree with any of your comments,
Right.
and they make a lot of sense. I heard a lot about increases in salaries. There may be, I doubt it, but there may be positions where we're paying too much, and I'd ask the town manager not to necessarily cut those in the budget, but make sure over time they're brought to the appropriate level. And it's the same thing we do at work. I get told all the time by my boss, if you want to increase that, you got to find somewhere else where you're spending too much and take that down. So that's just my 2 cents on the whole
Right.
salary structure.
And the town manager and I had this discussion last evening, and I asked the question that the salaries that are being proposed for fiscal 18 are salaries that have been negotiated, that are contractual. The positions that are being affected by the increase, these individuals in those positions, except for one, the town treasurer collector hasn't been appointed yet, are all aware that on July 1st, their salary is going to that amount. So
And it's negotiation with the union.
it's already been negotiated.
Yeah.
So we kind of are already obligated to
Right.
that. But you see in fiscal 17 and fiscal 18 a huge difference in some salaries. But at the same time, the fiscal 17 salary that is budgeted, it's already increased. He's already made at least one step towards that
Yeah.
fiscal 18
No,
number. So it's just kind of
yeah.
skewed.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much how you explained it last night. So I'm comfortable with that, but I also think the town clerk should be involved as well. Mr. Perry.
What is the 2017 number for the town clerk? Do we know offhand? What is
52.
52.
Mr. Haley.
For the town manager, when the study was done for salaries, was this, and forgive me if you mentioned it in the prior meetings, but was this position part of that study?
Yeah, I believe so.
It's in
Yeah,
there, yeah.
Part of the study.
And that yielded what? No change?
No, it was reduced from 65 to 40.
The
town clerk's
could
salary.
I
Yeah. Go ahead.
jump in? The study, according to the president, said the average was somewhere between 70 and 85, with maybe a low of about 60. But the town clerk has a very interesting position in that the town clerk is an elected town clerk, and so we, as a town council, set the town clerk's salary, not being part of a department head union or anything like that. So it's really a unique situation for the town clerk, and, you know, I think that, as I said, we need to pay every position the appropriate market rate, and we need to get there, not necessarily all at once, but over time, and I think we're doing that for all of our employees and making sure that works.
Mr. Wood.
And what I've said a couple times is, I think it's fair to pay a market rate to a professional appointed position. We had 4 people apply for the position at a lower salary. So we need to discuss that, because I don't mind paying what the compensation study says if we're actually paying for a professional full-time person. The current town clerk's doing a wonderful job and could be that professional full-time person, but the next elected person might decide to play golf instead. And so we need to balance that out, and maybe by taking the action to make it an appointed position, as opposed to an elected position, then we fund to the point where the compensation study says you pay for a town clerk. Thanks.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, there's a motion, there's a second to refer to the Budget and Finance Committee. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Where was my agenda here? Okay, Order 2017-020, special election, June 10th, 2017. I guess we just need to, do we need to vote and call for that tonight? Or we?
No, it's first reading, and there's no reason to refer that.
Didn't you see his schedule up there earlier?
Still hasn't shown up.
I saw it.
Does this need to be referred to any committees? No?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, so that's the first reading. And we are on to citizens' comments. You've been waiting patiently all night. I know you must have a comment. You're all set? Anybody else here wish to speak during the citizens' comments portion of our meeting? Anybody else? Council comments. I'll go to my far right. Start with Mr. Columbotus.
I would just like to thank the residents of District 5 for re-electing me to another 3 years on the council. I appreciate the endorsement, and will do my best to serve your interests. Thank you.
Congratulations to Mr. Columbotus and the rest of you folks who are back in the saddle, as it were. We'll comment on the Spring Fest being backyard to backyard on the campus. I think this year was less interesting in my neighborhood than it was last year. They really started early this year, though, much earlier. They were petered out, no pun intended. Dinner time was very quiet, much appreciated. They went inside due to inclement weather, and then 9 or 10 o'clock, you heard the raves going in the houses. But as always, the combined efforts for the various police forms and forces on campus and our own force here, I thought did a really good job. A little bit of congestion, foot traffic mostly, and 20 plus arrests. I was unharmed. My family was unharmed, and we enjoyed the scenery. Declan and I took a walk and enjoyed that too. So, other than that, that's it. Congratulations to everybody and my family for making it through Spring Fest.
Congratulations to Mr. Columbotus, Mr. Wood, our new council member joining us next Tuesday, apparently, now that we have a special meeting, Mr. George, and thank Mrs. Wright for her service for the last few years. And congratulations to everybody who put their name out on the ballot to run for an office this year. We need more volunteers. We need volunteers for all the committees that the town manager said, and it's great to see people getting out there and doing that. So, congratulations to all.
I echo Mr. Fitzgibbon's congratulations to all the elected people for the town, and thank you, Mrs. Wright, for her service on the council. A small asterisk on Springfest when I was in college, which was so long ago, it became a school-sanctioned event and no one went. So as soon as you make it school-sanctioned, no one will go. So that is just a piece of a tidbit of information to help with that. I was also unaffected by that, so that is it for me, I think.
All right, well, Springfest, I thought the university in town did a pretty good job of advertising what could happen, and yet I was surprised that there were 23 arrests, even after all that notification. I think that's why I asked if we could just get together and talk about what to do better next year. How do we still end up with 23 arrests after the effort made last year to get an improvement? I want to thank the voters of my district. An amazing turnout. I think it was 3 times as many people voted for me this time as last time. Landslide. Congratulations to Councilor Columbatis and Sean. Thank you to Mrs. Wright for her years of service here. We're all volunteers, right? We do this for fun. I do invite everybody to come out next Sunday if you can make it to the intersection, so that we can have a ceremony for Brian McSheffrey and name the corner after him. Thank you.
Again, echoing the prior sentiments, congratulations to all the re-elected councilors and to Mr. Sean George. We'll anticipate his arrival next week, and thank you to Mrs. Wright for her service as well. Also want to congratulate Mark Gilday on his appointment. We'll miss him at these meetings. I'm not sure if he'll miss us, but we'll wish him the best of luck there. I also want to personally extend sympathies to the family of Ed Warrenitz. As a little kid, I got my first bicycle from Ed's Hardware, and I did see that mentioned in his obituary, so it rang true for me. And also to the family of a longtime Bridgewater Lion, Sid Lyon, who passed away just short of his 90th birthday recently. He was the longest active member of the Bridgewater Lions Club. It just celebrated its 90th anniversary this year, and we just had a celebration in that regards this past weekend. So congratulations to the Bridgewater Lions Club on their anniversary, but deepest sympathies to the family of Sid Lyons. That's all I have. Thank you.
I'd like to congratulate the 2 members who were re-elected, and to our new one when he shows up next meeting. And I think I might make it through another year. That was for Peter, by the way.
2 more to go.
It's a 3-year term, Mr. Simon.
Please make both the years that are left.
Okay, was there a second? Oh.
This is council comments. This is last time, so sit
My
back,
last time
relax. It's gonna
I
be.
think it's my last time as
Like turn on
president
the
of the
fireplace
Ballot
and
Council.
dim the lights.
Again, I want to congratulate Councilman Wood and Councilor Peter Columbotus for their re-election to the council, and congratulations to Sean George on being elected councilman. Small turnout, but we're accustomed to that. But school committee, there's a new school committee member too from both Rainham and Bridgewater, and library trustee. So it was a lousy day weather-wise, as you guys know, and but it was a pretty good town election. I didn't know anything about Springfest until I read about the incidents in the paper. I didn't even know what was going on, so because I don't live down in that area. But and congratulations to our town council, Attorney Gilday, on being appointed a Superior Court judge. Congratulations, Mark. And on that note, we do have executive session? We do not? No.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
With notes, too. There's a motion and there's a second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We will see you next Tuesday, May 2nd.